In the heart of a dilapidated psychiatric hospital, long abandoned and forgotten by time, lies Ward C. It was sealed off decades ago after a series of unexplained deaths. The hospital staff whispered tales of patients driven to madness, their anguished screams echoing through the empty halls. The few who dared to speak of Ward C claimed it was cursed, a place where the boundary between sanity and insanity blurred. One rainy night, a group of urban explorers led by Emma decided to uncover the mysteries of Ward C. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and a sense of daring adventure, they navigated the crumbling corridors until they found the rusted door marked C. With a creak that echoed ominously, the door swung open, revealing a long, dark hallway. The air was thick with the scent of mold and decay, and the temperature dropped noticeably as they stepped inside. As they ventured deeper, the explorers found old medical records scattered on the floor, detailing bizarre and brutal treatments. The walls were adorned with frantic scribblings and eerie drawings. Emma felt a cold hand brush her shoulder. Turning quickly, she found nothing but darkness. Her flashlight flickered, and in its weak beam, she saw shadowy figures moving just out of reach. In a small locked room at the end of the hallway, they found a journal belonging to Dr. Harlow, the head psychiatrist of Ward C. His final entries spoke of a patient named Alice, whose condition was unlike anything he had seen. Alice claimed to hear voices that told her of the hospital's dark past, of unspeakable experiments and tortured souls. Dr. Harlow became obsessed with Alice, documenting her descent into madness. As they read the journal, the explorers heard whispers growing louder. The shadows seemed to close in around them, and Emma's flashlight died completely. Panic set in as they felt cold, invisible hands grabbing at them. One by one, the explorers disappeared, their screams echoing through the halls. Emma, the last to vanish, saw a spectral figure of a young woman in a hospital gown, her eyes hollow and her mouth twisted in a silent scream. The figure reached out to Emma, and as their hands touched, Emma's mind was flooded with horrific visions of Ward C's dark history. She saw doctors experimenting on patients, performing gruesome lobotomies, and subjecting them to inhumane treatments. Alice's voice echoed in her mind, recounting the endless torment she endured. Emma tried to pull away, but the figure's grip tightened, drawing her closer. She could feel her sanity slipping away, her thoughts merging with the tortured memories of the patients. In her final moments, she understood that the spirits of the patients and Dr. Harlow were trapped in an eternal torment. And now, she would join them. As the last of her strength faded, Emma's consciousness merged with the darkness of Ward C. The once lively explorer was now just another lost soul in the hospital's endless cycle of suffering.
St. Mark's Psychiatric Hospital had a reputation for treating the most severe cases of mental illness. Among its many wards was room 404, known to the staff as the Silent Room. No patient who entered ever spoke again. The room was said to have a life of its own, feeding on the fears and traumas of those confined within its walls. Dr. Sarah Whitman, a new and ambitious psychiatrist, was determined to uncover the truth behind the Silent Room. She reviewed the files of past patients, all of whom had been normal before their stay in 404. Their post-discharge notes were filled with blank pages, their voices forever stolen.
Sarah decided to conduct an experiment. She volunteered to spend a night in room 404, believing that a rational mind could withstand whatever the room held. She brought only a notebook and a voice recorder, determined to document her experience. The room was unremarkable at first glance: a bed, a chair, and a small table. But as the door closed, An oppressive silence fell over her. She turned on the voice recorder and began speaking, describing her surroundings and initial feelings of unease. Hours passed, and the silence became deafening. Sarah felt as if the room itself was pressing in on her, suffocating her thoughts. She heard faint whispers but couldn't make out the words. Her own voice began to falter as she tried to narrate her experience. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, a cacophony of jumbled voices that drowned out her thoughts. In her notebook, her handwriting became erratic, words trailing off into meaningless scribbles. Her mind felt foggy, as if an invisible force was erasing her very essence. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Panic set in as she realized she was losing her ability to communicate. The whispers crystallized into a single, coherent voice, a cold, emotionless tone that spoke directly to her mind. It revealed that the silent room was a vessel for the collective anguish and madness of every patient who had ever entered. Their voices, their souls, were trapped within its walls, feeding the room's insatiable hunger. Sarah's last conscious act was to press stop on the recorder. The next morning, the staff found her in a catatonic state, her eyes wide with terror, unable to speak or write. The voice recorder was still running, capturing only the sound of silence. The Riverside Institute for the Mentally Ill was known for its advanced treatments and therapies. One of its most controversial experiments involved a room lined entirely with mirrors. Dr. Victor Monroe believed that by confronting their reflections, patients could face and conquer their inner demons. The room, called the reflection chamber, became the center of his research. Ian, a young man plagued by severe anxiety and hallucinations, was chosen as the primary subject. Dr. Monroe was convinced that Ian's fragmented mind could be healed by continuous exposure to his own image. The first few sessions were uneventful. Ian simply stared at his reflection, his expression a mix of confusion and fear, but as the days passed, Ian's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He claimed to see figures in the mirrors, shadows that moved independently of him. He spoke of a dark version of himself that taunted and mocked him from the other side of the glass. Dr. Monroe dismissed these claims as hallucinations, encouraging Ian to continue. One night, Ian's screams echoed through the institute. The staff found him in the reflection chamber, his eyes wide with terror, his reflection grinning maniacally. The mirrors were untouched, but Ian insisted that his doppelganger had escaped and was now free in the real world. Dr. Monroe increased the intensity of the sessions, believing Ian was on the verge of a breakthrough. But the opposite happened. Ian's mental state deteriorated rapidly. He refused to enter the reflection chamber, screaming that his reflection was trying to replace him. During a particularly stormy night, Dr. Monroe decided to conduct a final intensive session. He locked Ian in the reflection chamber and watched from the observation room. Lightning flashed outside, casting eerie shadows across the mirrors. Ian's reflection began to move independently, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. The reflection pounded on the glass, and the entire room seemed to tremble. Ian's screams grew more frantic, and then, with a final flash of lightning, the mirrors shattered. When the staff rushed in, they found Ian unconscious, surrounded by shards of glass. His reflection was nowhere to be seen. In the weeks that followed, Ian's condition stabilized, but he was never the same. He spoke in a voice that was not his own, recounting memories and events that Dr. Monroe knew he couldn't possibly have experienced. The doppelganger had succeeded. Ian was gone, replaced by the malevolent reflection. Dr. Monroe's experiment was shut down, the reflection chamber sealed off. But late at night, staff reported seeing a shadowy figure moving behind the cracked mirrors, its eyes glowing with a sinister light, waiting for the next victim to dare to look into the glass. The reflection chamber became a legend among the hospital staff. a cautionary tale about the dangers of playing with the human psyche. Despite the warnings, there were always those who were curious, who wanted to see if the stories were true. And every so often, someone would find their way into the chamber. Their fate sealed the moment they looked into the mirrors.